Hello, my name is a Big Bubble, and I sometimes go by the name Simon. And Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays for those of you in the festive season. If you're watching this the day it gets put on YouTube or Boxing Day, preferably. This is a list of just some of my thoughts as we kind of get to the end of 2017. A lot of my kind of thoughts and what I think of the year has kind of been already described in my top 10 and how I celebrate Christmas. But really, what happens is Christmas is often the time I get presents, but then I also think back of what could have been, or sometimes maybe things I kind of messed up on. And then as I get towards the new year, at the end of this week, I kind of look forward to things and kind of just have things that will motivate me or want to drive me forward so I can always wake up the next day and see something cool and something interesting. And those are the things to look forward to. And that'll definitely be a list within the next week. But for now, I just want to talk about some of the things I kind of am a bit not sad about, but kind of just been bothering me, so to speak. But and it all, of course, relates to board games. Some of you might have experienced this as well, and some of you might be completely familiar with what I'm about to talk about. Now, the very first one is, of course, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm actually a really big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. I love D&D. I love the role-playing element to it. I enjoy watching a lot of streamers and a lot of YouTube channels have campaigns running and players create these wonderful characters and they get sent off on these great quests. And I had a group for the beginning of, or at the end of 2016, and I was hoping that would continue on to 2017. However, that kind of fell away. And I've kind of been trying ever since to find one. I haven't really been that successful. A big thing is I kind of always end up being the dungeon master, the guy that kind of tells the story, and that's not really me. I prefer making a character come to life because I feel like I could do that a lot better. My storytelling talents aren't exactly up to par. And so I think maybe for 2017, I'll definitely be trying to push myself just to find a nice, reliable group to do D&D with, or some sort of role-playing game, if it's something like Star Wars, or if it's like Call of Cthulhu, anything like that. But I would just like to get into something like that and experience that side a bit more. Next up is the Diamonds in the Rough. There have been a lot of games that have come out here, a lot. And also a lot of games that are still going to be coming out. This kind of relates a lot to Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a place I generally go for certain publishers. So Cool Me or Not is one of those publishers. And generally their stuff is quite hit or miss, so you kind of taking a chance, but then you also kind of miss out on stuff. So Awakened Realms, they did Lords of Hellas, which looks like a really cool area control game. But at the time, I kind of saw it. I looked at some of the reviews and people said it's wishy-washy, and so I kind of didn't want to pick it up. And now I'm at the stage where I'm looking at my collection. I'm like, I don't have that many area control games. I need an area control game. So I'm kind of worried that I might have missed out a couple of diamonds, especially as Origins was happening and Essen now is coming along. And Essen's like 3,000 games or something. And a lot of reviewers do a really good job of kind of pointing out which ones you should focus on. But I still feel like I might miss out on one game that would really, really excite me. And so those are kind of my regrets of not paying enough attention to games that are coming out. I feel like I should spend a bit more time just researching games that are really making waves. Or basically spending more time on Board Game Geek. Number 3 is not being more social and making bad calls. So this kind of relates a bit more to, Kickstarter, and also relates a bit more to my personal life. So I generally go to board game events once a month, and I also generally go, we have a Thursday night games night. I still feel like I should be doing more though. I should still be getting out a bit more. I should just trying to be getting more people just to play games. I live in South Africa, so going to a pub and playing games with my friends there isn't really something that can be done. And likewise, there isn't really a reliable meetup happening every so often. The monthly meetup's fine, but I feel like I should be trying to make more friends and then meeting up with them at different times during the year just to play more games, because I feel like that's often the best way to just find games that you really will enjoy, because often people just have different stuff, and I didn't feel like I did enough of that this year. I had times when I was invited and got to play Warhammer and absolutely hated it, but that was a good experience because I got to experience that tabletop environment that a lot of people kind of see as this kind of mystical thing, and that was great, but I feel like I should be doing more of that. Likewise, I've made some bad calls. I've liked Century Spice Road, picked up a copy, and then I played it a few more times, and I actually found that I didn't really like it. It was not as good as Splendor, in my opinion. It didn't really push the same buttons that Splendor does. And as a result, I had to sell off, which means I kind of made a loss. Same with Near and Far. This is a game that's been getting great reviews, and I thoroughly recommend it to people based on those reviews. But I know my group's not going to be a storytelling group. We're most likely going to play it once, and that's going to be about it. Which is kind of sad, which means also then I'd sell it on and pass it to someone else because it's kind of then a dead weight in my collection. Which is not great, but does mean it's been a bad call. I enjoy Ryan Lockett does some really amazing work, but oftentimes his games don't escalate themselves to the level that I want them to be at. That doesn't mean, again, Near and Far is bad. No, Near and Far is great. It's a fantastic storytelling game. But it was a bad call for me, and that was kind of like 2016 call leading into this. Speaking of bad calls, Massive Darkness was probably my biggest, second biggest. You'll see what number one is now. But Massive Darkness, I originally kickstarted, and I kickstarted because, there's a crap ton of miniatures, and they're all really great fantasy generic miniatures. So you have minotaurs, you have ogres, you have rat people, you have lizards, all of which are really good miniatures. And even if I saw at the time, I was thinking, if the game is not that good, I still have these really cool miniatures to use. But then I started thinking, hang on, I have these really cool miniatures to use, but I'm not going to be able to use them because, again, we go back to number 5, I don't have a reliable D&D group. So that kind of was a bummer. So my thing was, do I sit on this game, which I'm probably going to not really enjoy, especially because I have games like Imperial Assault, which is a much better dungeon crawler game, or Massive Darkness, Arcadia Quest, which is a much better combat and battle game. Do I sit with Massive Darkness in hand, or do I sell it and then try and pick up some better games later on? And I feel like my choice was the correct one, where I sold it. I picked up games like Twilight Imperium 4th edition, which is unbelievably good. But at the same time, again, I kind of was a waste of money. I want to get Massive Darkness again just because it's got really cool miniatures, but again, am I wasting my time? Would it be better for me just to wait until something like Descent 3rd edition drops and I can pick up miniatures then? But yeah, Massive Darkness was probably the biggest Kickstarter I was looking forward to, and then when I finally arrived, I was kind of left deflated, not because the game didn't deliver on what I expected, but just because things had changed when it eventually got to me. My situation had changed, which is not great. The final one is Runewars, the miniatures game. This is probably my biggest regret of 2017, which is weird because if you've seen my top 10 list, and if you haven't, go check that out before I spoil anything, but if you have seen that list, you will know that Runewars was pretty much one of the best games I played this year. I thoroughly love it. It's one of the crowning tabletop miniatures games out there, in my personal opinion. So why is it my biggest regret? And the simple thing is, it's just far too expensive. I feel like what Fantasy Flight are doing is great, but then you have to think of what they did with other miniature games. If they think of what they did with Star Wars X-Wing, they had a very low entry point, and the players would slowly build up their collection over time. With Runewars, the miniatures game, you had to go in really, really hard, and so you end up spending a lot of money. So I've looked back and I'm like, a lot of that's money I could have spent on picking up some better games. Not technically better games, but just a more larger variety of games for me to play. So again, we go back to like the Lord of Hellas route. I maybe could have picked that up instead, which again is kind of frustrating for me. I think another thing is just because I don't get to play it often enough. Again, this is Fantasy Flight's problem, where because they kind of price the game out of a lot of board gamers' price ranges, that kind of diminished the audience. And then they're releasing Star Wars Legion later next year, and that's going to cut the market again, because the people that are playing miniatures games are either going to stay with their Warhammer, or they're going to go to Star Wars Legion, which means they're not going to pick this game up. So really, this is a great game, but it's just not really for any single audience, and I feel like that's a failing of Fantasy Flight's part. Like, also just the lore itself, would you rather go for the Warhammer Space Marines versus the Eldar Chaos, or would you rather go for generic fantasy? Not to say that Runebound isn't an interesting world, but there's nothing appealing there for it. And so that was my biggest regret, is that Runewars, while being this fantastic game, is let down by a lot of choices that are outside of the game designer's scope, and that is bad pricing, a very lackluster audience, and just the lore isn't gripping enough to really keep one entertained. Now, what's probably going to happen with Runewars was I might pick up one or two. I might pick up the Demon expansion army next year when I have some of the cash, but that'll probably be it. I'm not going to try and invest myself further. And that really is what 2017 left me with. I'm probably made some really bad calls when it comes to games that I enjoy. And even calls that I made with games that I enjoyed, I didn't have the most promising experience in one way or another. I should try and be more social. I should try and just play different games like tabletop miniatures games, or just play more Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games, which should get more into that. And those really are my regrets. Of course, you can insert the generic "I should have got into Bitcoin" joke as well. Anyway, that's it for me. That's going to be it for 2017. But there's still going to be one more video coming up before then. But let me know what you thought. Maybe you had some thoughts on what you regretted in 2017. Maybe you had way too much to eat for Christmas. Maybe you didn't get those games that you really wanted to, and maybe you missed out on something. But let me know what you missed out on. As always, remember to subscribe and to leave a comment. And also, the more people that watch the video means more views for me, which means more people get engaged in this community, and that is great. As always, thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.